The 42nd floor of the Sterling Vane building doesn't smell like a workplace. It smells like filtered oxygen, expensive sandalwood, and the distinct ozone-heavy scent of high-end servers working at maximum capacity. It's a silence that costs $40 million a year in overhead. People here move with a calculated grace, a choreography of tailored wool and silent leather soles. They believe they are the apex predators of the financial ecosystem, operating in a vacuum where the laws of physics and morality are merely suggestions for the less imaginative. I sat in the reception area, a space designed specifically to make anyone waiting feel insignificant. The chairs were Mies van der Rohe originals, beautiful to look at, but structurally unforgiving. I didn't mind. I like things that are structurally honest. I watched a junior associate speed walk past me, his eyes glued to a Bloomberg terminal on his wrist, his pulse visible in the vein of his neck. He was terrified. In this building, terror is the primary fuel. I was wearing a charcoal suit that was 6 years old. To the untrained eye, I looked like a mid-level auditor from a regulatory body that Sterling Vane usually ate for breakfast. That was the point. When you've spent 2 decades building the invisible skeletons of the world's most complex financial systems, you learn that visibility is a liability. The person who holds the keys never needs to wear them around their neck. "Mr. Eris?" The voice was like a serrated blade wrapped in silk. I looked up. Marcus Thorne, the senior managing director of operations, stood by the glass double doors. He didn't come out to greet me. He simply stood there, waiting for me to gravitate toward his orbit. Marcus was a man who viewed every human interaction as a conquest. His hair was a silver fox masterpiece, and his smile never reached his eyes that were currently calculating my net worth and coming up with a number he found pitiable. "Follow me," he said, turning before I could even stand. We walked through the open-plan nerve center. This was the pit. Hundreds of monitors displayed the proprietary trading algorithms that moved billions of dollars in milliseconds. To Marcus and his team, this was their kingdom. To me, it was a crime scene. I could see the glitches in the flow, the way certain trades were being routed through shadow accounts, the tiny fractional delays that indicated a skimming protocol. It was messy. It was arrogant. We entered his corner office, a cathedral of glass overlooking the harbor. Marcus didn't offer me a seat. He sat behind a desk carved from a single slab of obsidian and began leafing through a leather-bound folder. "I'll be brief, Eris," Marcus said, not looking up. "The board is restructuring the internal audit department. Your contract as a system consultant is being terminated effective immediately. We've found your recent reports on our compliance architecture to be, let's say, alarmist. You're seeing ghosts in the machine that don't exist." I remained standing, my hands clasped loosely behind my back. "The ghosts are there, Marcus. They're just polite enough not to scream until the lights go out." He let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. That's the kind of cryptic academic nonsense that made this transition so easy. You're a builder, Eris, a technician. You don't understand the velocity of modern capital. You built a system for a world that used to trade in gold bars. We trade in light. We need a system that breathes. By breathes, you mean a system that allows for a 4% margin of untraceable leakage? I said quietly. Marcus stopped flipping pages. He looked up, his expression hardening into a mask of pure predatory condescension. Careful, that sounds like a defamatory accusation. And before you think about taking your concerns to the SEC, I'd suggest you look at this. He slid a single sheet of heavyweight paper across the obsidian. It was a compliance authorization waiver. It was a high-level document that essentially gave the operations team the power to bypass the very safeguards I had spent 3 years installing. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card for every illegal trade they'd made in the last 6 months. At the bottom of the page, in the section reserved for the lead systems architect, was a signature. My signature. It was a masterpiece of forgery. The slight tilt of the A, the specific way the ink thinned at the tail of the S. It looked more like my signature than my own handwriting did. You signed off on the upgrades, Eris. He leaned back, interlacing his fingers. You authorized the bypass protocols. If there's leakage, as you put it, the forensic trail leads directly to your keyboard. You didn't just allow this, you engineered it. I picked up the paper, feeling the weight of the stock. I could see the faint indentation of the pen, a heavy-handed stroke, likely a fountain pen, Marcus's pen. He was watching me, waiting for the panic to set in. He expected me to stutter, to deny, to plead. He wanted to see the moment the smartest man in the room realized he'd been outplayed by a man who didn't even know how to code. "This is a very serious document, Marcus," I said, my voice remaining flat, devoid of the tremor he was fishing for. "It's your career's obituary," he countered. "Now you're going to pack your digital files, sign the non-disclosure agreement my assistant is currently printing, and you're going to disappear. If you ever mention Sterling Vane to a soul, this document goes to the feds, and you'll be the one wearing the orange jumpsuit while we're testifying as the victims of your rogue engineering." I looked at the signature again. I thought about the thousands of lines of code I'd written for the Sterling Vane core. I thought about the Genesis protocol, the hidden layer of the compliance system that I hadn't told anyone, not even the board. I looked at Marcus. He looked like a man who had already won. He didn't realize that he was standing on a trap door, and I was the only one who knew where the lever was. "You really should have done your homework, Marcus," I said, sliding the paper back to him. "You know what they say about architects. We never build a house without knowing exactly how to burn it down from the inside." Marcus sneered, his hand hovering over the intercom to call security. "Is that a threat? Because it sounds like the pathetic whimpering of a man who just lost everything." "It's not a threat," I said, checking my watch. The market would close in exactly 4 minutes. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving the forged document on his desk. As I reached the handle, I heard the first subtle change in the office atmosphere. The hum of the servers in the walls shifted pitch. It was a low, mournful moan, the sound of a system being forced to tell the truth. I didn't need to look back to know that every monitor in the pit was about to turn a very specific, very unforgiving shade of red. The alarms weren't sirens. They were a rhythmic, low-frequency pulse that emanated from the recessed ceiling speakers, the sound of a multi-billion-dollar heart skipping a beat. In the pit, the frantic energy of the traders didn't just stop, it curdled. The red on their screens wasn't the standard market dip crimson, it was a flat, matte scarlet, the color of a total system lockout. I didn't leave the office. I stopped with my hand on the heavy glass door, watching the reflection of Marcus Thorne as his world dissolved in the obsidian surface of his desk. "What did you do?" Marcus's voice had lost its silk. It was thin, reedy, the sound of a man realizing the floor beneath him was actually a veil. He was punching keys on his console with a desperate, clumsy violence. "Eris, what is this? Reset the gateway, now!" I turned slowly. "I told you, Marcus, I don't build houses without knowing where the levers are. You thought the compliance system was a fence to keep the regulators out. You never realized it was a cage to keep you in." The heavy oak doors to the executive suite swung open. It wasn't security. It was a phalanx of 5 people in charcoal gray overcoats, led by a woman whose very presence seemed to drop the room's temperature by 10 degrees. Elena Vance, the chairperson of the Sterling Vane Global Oversight Committee. Behind her were two forensic accountants from the Internal Revenue Division's Criminal Investigation Division, and a man carrying a ruggedized pelican case. Marcus stood up, his face a ghostly shade of gray. "Elena, what is this? We're in the middle of a technical glitch. Eris here has just been terminated. He's likely sabotaged the—" "Sit down, Marcus," Elena said. Her voice didn't carry volume, it carried weight. She didn't look at him, she looked at me and gave a single curt nod of professional recognition. The man with the pelican case set it on the obsidian desk, right on top of the forged waiver. He opened it to reveal a localized server node. He plugged a fiber optic lead directly into the desk's primary port. "The glitch you're experiencing, Marcus, is a sovereign default trigger," I said, walking back toward the center of the room. I leaned against the Mies van der Rohe chair I had been dismissed from moments ago. When I designed the Sterling Vane architecture, I implemented a protocol called Genesis. It's a passive-aggressive piece of code. It doesn't look for theft, it looks for intent. Marcus looked from the paper on his desk to Elena. "I have his signature. He authorized the bypass. Look at the document." Elena finally looked at the paper. She didn't pick it up. "Marcus, you've always been a brilliant operator, but you're a functional illiterate when it comes to the systems that actually move the money. You thought a signature on a piece of paper was a legal shield. You forgot that in this building, the only law is the digital ledger. The waiver you forged was scanned into the system at 9:14 a.m. this morning. My system didn't just record the image, it recorded the metadata of the scanner, the biometric pressure of the person who fed it into the tray, and most importantly, it cross-referenced the authorization code with my private hardware key." I pulled a small, unassuming titanium USB device from my pocket. "This key hasn't left my person in 3 years. The system recognized the signature, yes, but it also recognized that the mandatory biometric handshake, my thumbprint on the encrypted terminal, was missing. When a high-level compliance waiver is filed without a hardware handshake, the Genesis protocol doesn't just reject it, it assumes the lead architect is being coerced. It assumes a hostile takeover of the firm's integrity has occurred." The silence that followed was clinical. In the pit outside, the monitors began to scroll through every shadow account, every fractional skim, and every leak Marcus had engineered over the last fiscal year. It wasn't just a list, it was a confession written in the immutable language of Python and C++. Marcus sank back into his chair. The predatory mask had completely shattered. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked smaller, the expensive tailoring of his suit now appearing several sizes too large for his frame. "As of 4 minutes ago," Elena Vance said, her eyes fixed on Marcus with a terrifying neutrality, "Sterling Vane is no longer a private entity. The Genesis protocol triggered a material breach of ethics clause in our debt covenants. Every major creditor we have, BlackRock, Vanguard, the sovereign wealth funds, just saw their debt convert into preferred equity. They've exercised their right to replace the board, and they've appointed a temporary conservator to oversee the liquidation of your personal assets to cover the leakage Eris so helpfully documented." "You can't do that," Marcus whispered. "The bylaws." "The bylaws were rewritten 18 months ago," I said. "I wrote them. I tucked the Equity for Compliance clause in the 300-page technical annex that you signed without reading because you thought it was just a manual for server maintenance. You were so busy looking for the back door that you didn't realize I had turned the front door into a trap." The logistics of the collapse were beautiful in their complexity. By forging that signature, Marcus hadn't just framed me, he'd tripped a wire that liquidated the company's autonomy. He'd turned himself into a biological virus that the system had just identified and purged. One of the forensic accountants stepped forward and placed a digital tablet in front of Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, we have a warrant for your personal devices and access to your offshore holdings in the Caymans. We've already frozen the accounts." "The light you mentioned earlier? It's currently being refracted through a federal lens." Marcus looked at me then. The hatred in his eyes was pure, but it was impotent. It was the look of a man who had brought a knife to a fight, only to realize the other person owned the air he was breathing. "You're a ghost, Eris," he spat, his voice trembling. "You're a nothing, a technician. You think this makes you a king?" "No," I said, standing up and smoothing the front of my 6-year-old suit. "A king is a target. I'm the man who designed the crown, and I made sure yours was lined with mercury." I looked at Elena. "The system is fully decrypted. The evidence is indexed and mirrored on the IRS servers. My work is done." "Not quite," Elena said, her voice softening just a fraction, the closest she would ever get to an apology. "The new ownership group has a request. They don't want a consultant anymore. They want a CEO who actually understands the math of the business. The car is waiting downstairs to take us to the emergency board meeting." I looked at Marcus one last time. He was watching his own signature, the forgery he was so proud of, being placed into an evidence bag. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. "I'll be down in a moment," I told Elena. "I just want to enjoy the silence for a minute. It's the most expensive thing in this building, and I finally earned it." As they led Marcus out, not with handcuffs, not yet, but with the crushing weight of 4 federal agents surrounding him, the red screens in the pit began to flicker. The system was rebuilding, but it wasn't rebuilding for him. The hierarchy hadn't just flipped, it had been erased and redrawn from the first line of code. The transition of power in a financial institution of this scale doesn't happen with a handshake. It happens with a synchronization of servers. As I walked down the hallway toward the executive boardroom, the atmosphere had shifted. The frantic, cocaine-edged energy of the trading floor had been replaced by a heavy, contemplative stillness. People weren't looking at their terminals anymore. They were looking at me. They didn't see an auditor anymore. They saw the man who had turned their world into a glass house. The boardroom was a sterile environment of brushed steel and frosted glass. Elena Vance was already there, flanked by the new representatives of the creditor bloc, men and women who managed trillions, people who viewed the world as a series of risk-weighted assets. They didn't care about Marcus Thorne's charisma. They cared that I had preserved the structural integrity of their investment when the people they'd hired to guard it were busy trying to hollow it out. "The emergency measures have been ratified," Elena said, sliding a digital tablet toward me. "The Genesis protocol is now the firm's baseline operating system, but a system is only as good as the hand that guides it. We've cleared the executive floor. 64 terminations effective immediately. Every managing director involved in the shadow account routing has been handed a severance package consisting of a legal subpoena and a frozen 401k. I looked at the list of names. It was a surgical removal of the firm's stars, the high performers who generated the most revenue through the most questionable means. In the short term, the firm's P&L would take a hit. In the long term, we were removing a malignancy. I want the associate I saw this morning, the one with the Bloomberg terminal on his wrist, Julian Vance. No relation to you, I assume, Elena? None, she replied. Find him. He was terrified because he saw the glitches and didn't have the status to speak up. Promote him to VP of Risk Analytics. I want people who are afraid of the system's failure, not people who think they're its master. This was the reconstruction. It wasn't about revenge. It was about recalibration. For years, Sterling Vane had been a pyramid, based on the assumption that the people at the bottom were disposable and the people at the top were infallible. I was flipping the pyramid. I began implementing a series of hard stop mandates. We decoupled bonuses from raw volume and tied them to the lack of compliance flags. We eliminated the opaque dark pools Marcus had used as his personal playground. We made the system transparent, not out of a sense of altruism, but because transparency is the ultimate deterrent to stupidity. An hour later, I was told Marcus was waiting in a secondary holding room. He had been allowed to stay until his personal effects were cleared, a courtesy usually reserved for those whose downfall didn't involve federal felony charges. I walked in alone. The room was small, meant for private client consultations. Marcus was sitting on a low leather sofa, his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, and for a second I saw a flicker of the old Marcus, the arrogance, the belief that there was still a move to be made, a bribe to be offered, a throat to be cut. "You think you've won," his voice was a jagged rasp, "but you've just inherited a corpse. You've killed the alpha. Without the risk takers, this place is just a glorified savings and loan. You've turned a Ferrari into a Volvo, heiress." I pulled out a chair and sat across from him, leaning forward. "A Ferrari with no brakes isn't a car, Marcus. It's a coffin. You didn't take risks. You took advantage of a system you were too lazy to understand. You thought you were the driver, but you were just a passenger who didn't realize the car was self-driving. I made this firm," he spat. "No," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt louder than a shout. "I marketed this firm. You decorated it. You spent $40 million a year on vibes. I built the engines. I wrote the code that allowed you to sleep at night. And when you decided to forge my name, to try and pin your theft on the one person who knew exactly how much you were stealing, you committed the only sin that actually matters in this building." "And what's that?" "You assumed I was beneath you because I didn't care about the things you care about. You saw my suit, my silence, my lack of status, and you mistook it for weakness. You thought the architect was a servant. You forgot that I'm the one who knows where the loading-bearing walls are. I didn't just design the compliance system to catch you, Marcus. I designed it to replace you." I stood up. I had no more words for him. He was a legacy error, a bug in the code that had finally been patched. "The feds are downstairs," I said as I reached the door. "I'd suggest you use your last few minutes of status to call a very expensive lawyer. Although, based on the asset seizure warrants I just signed, I'm not sure how you're going to pay him." I walked out of the room and back into the main hallway. The sun was beginning to set over the harbor, casting long, golden shadows across the 42nd floor. The red screens were gone. The system was green, stable, and honest. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city. For 20 years, I had stayed in the shadows, building the invisible frameworks that kept the world from collapsing under the weight of its own greed. I had always been told that status was something you earned through visibility, through titles, through the roar of the crowd, through the sheer force of your own ego. But standing there, in the quiet of a firm I now commanded, I realized the truth. Status is a performance. It's a costume people wear when they're afraid they aren't enough. Worth, however, is silent. Worth is the line of code that doesn't break. Worth is the integrity of a system that refuses to lie, even when its masters demand it. The world is full of people like Marcus Thorne, men who believe because they own the map, they created the land. They are wrong. The world belongs to the builders. It belongs to the ones who know that the most powerful thing you can be is the person everyone underestimates. I checked my watch. There was a board meeting in 5 minutes. I had a legacy to dismantle and a future to code. I didn't need a golden elevator or a silver tongue to do it. I just needed the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, is the highest status asset in the room.